Hey friends, welcome back to She's At It Again. My name's Tanya and I want you to join me as I cook some smothered steak. This is something that starts with cube steaks. I'm just using 4 tenderized cube steaks and it can't get a lot easier than this. I know I say that about a lot of things, but it really can't. And as long as I remember, my family has made this and it's just something that just kind of one of those things on rotation. So let's start by turning our burner on. I have some olive oil in here, maybe a couple of tablespoons of olive oil. Gonna get it hot, not super hot, but hot enough to fry a piece of meat. I'm gonna get about a ½ cup of plain flour out of my bucket. This is my organic flour in this container. I'm going to add to that let's see. Every time I set up my camera, I put it in front of a drawer that I need to open. So I hesitate about opening a drawer to get a spoon out. So we'll get about a teaspoon of salt. Get about a ½ teaspoon of ground black pepper. And that's our mix. You don't need a bunch of different flavors in this because your sauce is going to flavor it up really nicely. Now, you could take an egg wash and dip this meat in it, but I'm not going to this time. I'm just going to put it straight in the flour, get it breaded, and then we're going to fry it in our hot oil here. But I am going to cut these in half. Sometimes they're just easier to get out of the serving pan when you have smaller pieces rather than 4 big pieces. It's easier to get out 8, and we're going to share these with our neighbors who are kind of under the weather. So I'll just take 4 small pieces out and send down to them. I remember when I was first married and I started making this dish, and I never really paid a lot of attention to when my mother was making it, but she made it pretty often, and I just thought, oh, I could do that. So I go to the store and I see these packages of cube steaks, and honestly, I think I bought one that had either 8 or 10 cube steaks in it because I thought, yeah, that'll probably fit in a 9 by 13 pan. Oh my word. I had cube steaks for the whole entire neighborhood. It was insane. Needless to say, I learned my lesson. It doesn't take that many for this. Each cube steak is plenty enough for 1 serving. This is going to have a mushroom gravy on it. If you're not fond of mushrooms, you're welcome to switch that out for sliced onions. It will have a different flavor, but you'll still have the benefit of having the flavor of something else in there. I've sometimes used onions, but I am a big fan of the flavor of mushrooms. I like that earthy flavor, particularly in sauces that have kind of a gravy texture to it. This is going to be, I'm going to make this now, and then I will bake it off in the oven tonight for dinner. And I'm not sure why it's called smothered steak. I remember as a kid wondering that myself, because smothering was not necessarily a thing you wanted to participate in, but a smothered steak just sounded delicious. I don't know why that name. I'm not sure. I don't know the history of the name of smothered steaks. So our oil is hot enough to sizzle when I drop a piece of meat in there. Well, part of it was anyway. If you'll take and push your flour into the meat, it's going to make the meat spread out, expand, and kind of go flat. But it needs the flour inside those little cracks to keep it from drawing up into a little ball once it starts cooking. You'll want to have at least a 2-quart casserole dish of some kind of baking dish that's oven safe, ready to put your meat in once it's fried. So I have mine on the countertop behind me. We're going to cook our meat, put it in the pan, and then we're going to make our sauce in the same pan that we cooked the meat in. Now you only want to cook a few pieces of this at a time because you want your oil to maintain that heat. If you put too much in your skillet that's cold, I mean, common sense just tells you your oil is going to get cold. This is a well-loved, excuse me, Zoe. This is a well-loved skillet, so it's not exactly flat on the bottom. I inherited this, and so I kind of have to hold the handle up to keep it exposed to the flat surface of the heat. So we'll cook about 4 pieces at a time. You're going to reserve your flour that you dredge the meat in as well. That's going to be part of our mixture for our gravy, our sauce. This is my 2 and 3/4 quart casserole dish. Now don't expect to cook these like a chicken fried steak. You're not going to cook them super crispy. You just want to cook the outside of them because these are going to bake in the oven and bake all the way through later on. You just want to get the outside nice and browned. Okay, so really, that's about all you have to worry about it cooking. Even if it's still pink in the middle, don't panic. These are going to cook later on in the oven. Remember, reserve your flour. All right, we've gotten these about browned enough. And it's fine to overlap these pieces of meat if you need to in the baking dish. Lower our heat just a little bit. I've chopped up about 3 mushrooms here, and I'm going to rake these into the skillet. Add just a little bit more salt. Maybe 1/4 teaspoon. Scrape those brown bits off the bottom of the skillet as best you can. If you have a cast iron skillet to make this in, that would be ideal as well. I just happened to grab this one. It's the first one I came to. You want one that's deep enough to hold, I would say probably about 2 cups of liquid, because that's about how much gravy you're going to have in this skillet before we pour it into the pan on top of the meat. So just until your mushrooms are softened a bit. I'm going to take, I just have to eyeball this. Sorry, I don't like it when people do that to me, so I apologize. I would say maybe 1.5 tablespoons to 2 tablespoons of the flour. We're going to make a roux out of this. Again, R-O-U-X is roux, and it just means to make a paste. Then when we add the liquid to it, it's going to be a thickened gravy or sauce. All right, here's the secret ingredient. I have about a tablespoon of cream cheese. It doesn't have to be this brand. It doesn't have to be soft. It just needs to be cream cheese. So we have our burner turned on about medium heat. We want to cook that flour enough to where, I don't mean for flour to sound like it's a bad taste, but we don't necessarily want this to taste like flour. So we want to cook that flour taste out of it. So your cream cheese will kind of start melting into the rest of it. And we're going to slowly pour about, we're going to see how much this takes. I have about 1 3/4 cups of water in that. Turn my heat back up just a little bit. Maybe not that high. Oops. Finish pouring the rest of the water in there. Once we get our gravy in, poured on top of our meat in our container here, I'll set it aside. I'll let it cool down, put it in the fridge, and then I'll bake it for dinner. That's for this evening. This will bake at 350 for about an hour. So I'll put a layer of parchment over it, over the surface, then a layer of aluminum foil over that. I just don't like the aluminum foil to risk coming in contact with the meat, because there's a reaction between the acid in the meat and the aluminum, and it will eat a hole in the aluminum, as crazy as that sounds. If you put aluminum foil in a turkey and you put it in the fridge and come back the next day and you've got holes in your aluminum foil, that's what I'm talking about. That's the reaction. So I don't want the foil touching the food, so I'll put parchment over the container, then put the foil on top of it, and we'll bake it off in the oven. Maybe that's where the smothered part comes in. Maybe you just got it covered in foil and you got it in the oven and it's smothering in there. I don't know. I'm just guessing. I don't really know what I'm talking about. Okay, our gravy's thickening up nicely. It'll still thicken up once it comes in contact with the flour that's on this meat and it's cooking in the oven, especially after an hour. It's going to thicken up just a little bit too, and it is going to be a lovely, lovely gravy on this meat. Self-basting, and we're going to serve it with our baked macaroni and cheese, and we'll have some homemade rolls, and maybe some green beans, maybe some sweet and spicy green beans that I'll make. That's our comfort meal. We have cold weather moving in. It's really kind of cloudy and rainy looking outside, but the rain's moved out. But it's supposed to get really cold quick this afternoon. So this will be a nice dinner when it gets cold. Okay, you just want to stir this until your cream cheese is pretty much distributed evenly through there and you don't see any big lumps of it, which I wouldn't be mad if I got a big lump of cream cheese in mine. But you want it to be smooth and thickened. When it starts thickening, you can pretty much tell that it's ready to turn the heat off. So that's a nice consistency right there. So we're going to pour this over our meat. All right, get a piece of parchment out. Parchment's kind of weird. If it starts acting up, just take it and roll it up into a ball, and then you can shape it the way you want. But right now, it's about the same size as that pan, so it's behaving okay right now. Fold it as though you're gift wrapping it. There we go. Okay, it's ready to sit and cool off for a bit. And like I said, about an hour before we need to eat dinner, I'll put this in the oven at 350. I'll put my baked macaroni and cheese in there after that, and we'll get it all done at about the same time. I'll continue this video when this comes out of the oven, let you see what it looks like. Thanks. All right, we have here our finished product, our smothered steak. And you can see the gravy around it's still bubbly. There's our little individual steaks. All right, now you got to look at the final product. If only you could taste it. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you give it a try.